Naked Lobster brings us something which I can't tell if it's real or somebody just posting crazy stuff for reactions on Twitter. Somebody who I guess has been renamed Dr. Malpractice MD writes, "The fact remains that being fat is considered a crime, and until that changes, nothing else will change." What the hell are they talking about? I don't even know where to begin with this, so I'm just going to move on. Howdy One Direct brings us something from Instagram. There's supposed to be comebacks when family members say things like this over the holidays. For example, if a family member says, "I'm going to start my diet in the new year," your one pepper response is, "Why do you feel like you need the diet?" Your two pepper response is, "It's a shame you feel the need to say this each year. Why do you constantly make yourself suffer through the first few weeks of the most miserable month?" Three peppers, "Diet culture is a toxic industry that makes billions off insecurities it brainwashes us into having from infancy. I thought you were smarter than that." And if your family member says, "I feel so fat right now," one pepper, "Why do you say that like it's a bad thing?" Two peppers, "In order to feel something, it has to be an emotion. Fat is not an emotion, nor is it a negative thing anymore. So, want to try again?" That may be the stupidest thing they wrote. "You can't feel hunger, it's not an emotion. You can't feel pain, it's not an emotion." Lame. Three peppers, "I'm disappointed that you still subscribe to such antiquated phrases to describe something as normal as feeling full. Fat isn't a feeling, much less a negative one, and you should really reconsider the way the diet industry has brainwashed you." Just dropped by to say, replies, one pepper, "You're really missing the point there, Cheryl. These are perfectly understandable things." Two peppers, "Why are you like this, Cheryl?" Three peppers, "I know your family, but if you keep pushing your personal crusade into everything, we're just not going to invite you next year." Stupid Sprinkles brings us something that's really tiny. I had an obese person in my friend group that was such a hypocrite. She would say that it wasn't okay to make fun of someone's weight, which I think is true, but she would body shame me all the time when I was at a low, healthy weight. She would make fun of my nose and forehead, and I had scars on my legs, and she would body shame me for my scars and face. But she would lose it if I said the term plus-sized, because it's forcing an unhealthy comparison. One time we had an argument about why it's not okay to make fun of people's faces, and she said that making fun of someone's nose is fine, but calling someone overweight is not. And she said something that pissed me off. She said that losing weight is unhealthy, but getting a nose job and lip fillers is not inherently unhealthy. K-Berry replies, "Big nose phobia has more validity than fat phobia. Short of getting plastic surgery, a big nose is an immutable feature. Being fat is not." I'm beginning to see that for some people, body positivity is a selfish thing. To some people, it means, don't make fun of anything that I suffer from, but it's okay for me to make fun of anything you suffer from, sucker. Naked Lobster brings us. Someone's replying to somebody. "You aren't listening. Calories in, calories out has been debunked. It is biased junk science from faulty research. Some people, usually men who carry cutaneous fat, will lose it with diet and exercise." People who aren't native English speakers, and probably some who are native English speakers, might not realize what a ridiculous thing they said. Cutaneous fat would be skin fat. I either suggest the fat is in the skin itself, or it's on top of the skin. In either case, if you've got this problem, diet and exercise probably will not help, as somebody has covered you in butter. They continue, "That is the minority experience. Congratulations, you won a genetic lottery. Women are more likely to have subcutaneous fat, which is regulated by hormones. Limiting calories is more likely to cause weight gain in the long term for us because of how it affects the hormone balance. I have probably lost more weight in my life than you weigh, and it wasn't a lack of discipline or willpower that caused it to come back. It's what happens." It's what happens when you have a bad plan. It's understandable having a bad plan. There's a lot of misinformation out there, but at some point you got to realize, maybe if I just did it differently, it would succeed easily. Lakeside Miners brings us. "Please don't compliment people on weight loss. I've lost a bunch of weight due to dealing with food allergies. My weight loss is associated with grief over foods I can no longer eat." Let's pause there for a second. Grief over food. I'm sorry, but if certain foods you can't eat and that makes you want to cry, you're addicted to certain foods. Stress and hunger when I don't have the right foods available. Why would not having the right foods make you hungry? Having food available at all means that you're able to satisfy your hunger, unless your hunger is psychological, in which case you need to look into that. Anxiety about not being able to access safe foods while I'm traveling or even out driving around town. Again, this is a list of things that caused weight loss for this person. Anxiety doesn't directly cause weight loss. Their main problem here seems to be the inability to find safe foods, not the anxiety that causes. Worry about money and feeling guilty about wasting environmental resources as I have to replace my clothes with smaller sizes. Is this a joke? They've lost weight because they're worried about having to buy smaller clothes. I suspect that they are kind of so discombobulated, maybe from too much caffeine or something, that they forgot what their list was about. It turned into things I like to complain about. When people say, wow, you look great, have you lost some weight? It's not a positive statement for me. You can never know why people have lost weight. Maybe there was a medical condition like cancer, eating disorders, or, like me, food allergies. Just don't comment on people's weight. Hashtag diet culture, hashtag food allergy. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It's okay to compliment people. Maybe you'll make a mistake and they'll get mad at you. That happens sometimes. Kangaroo replies, after years of telling people how it's totally fine to buy new clothes because you outgrew your old ones as an adult, and shaming people for losing weight in an effort to keep their current wardrobe, it's suddenly wasteful to buy smaller clothes. Also, do fat activists assume that a person has allergies when they avoid certain foods? Or do they secretly or openly shame them for fat phobia and suspect anorexia? Every time they say eat a burger, because thin shaming isn't bad, do they wonder if burgers are gluten-free? And would a person with celiac be able to eat one safely? People complimented me on my weight loss when I was grieving a family member. That actually made me notice how much weight I had lost, and I started eating again. And, whatever, they didn't know. It didn't bother me at all. From Smitter. My brother's in-laws visited my family. The mother-in-law, approximately a size 10, talked about how she felt so unwell when she was 20 pounds heavier. In front of my mother, who was super swollen from her cortisone treatment. In front of me, I have at least 70 pounds on her. I mean, your body is your story and you're entitled to it, but maybe you shouldn't go on and on about it in front of people who are fatter than you. It's really not mandatory to talk about it. And I feel fine at my size, to be honest. It's only a problem if I have to walk up a bunch of stairs. I'm always surprised when people feel so unwell at size 14. I suspect it's in part psychosomatic, and when you feel fat, you blame your weight for every problem. Goddess of love. It's only a problem if I have to walk up a bunch of stairs. Until 10 years later, when it's only a problem when you have to walk moderate distances. Until you have trouble walking at all. Until you can't stay standing for more than a minute or so at a time. Compounded with things like hypertension, diabetes, joint problems, coronary artery disease, etc. Obesity really robs people of their hobbies and independence as they move into their old age. Throwaway played him brings us. What's the best way to make someone crave something? Simple. Tell them they can't have it. Even if they say no 99 times out of 100, that one time is inevitable. And eventually 1 becomes 2, which becomes 4, and so on. Binging is almost universally caused by restricting. Fact. Decent Lead replies, I've never heard such an incorrect and generalized statement before as restriction being the sole cause for binging universally. Things that cause binging other than restricting: medications, mental illness, parasitic infections, anxiety, depression. I think they also forgot childhood trauma. Ms. Beaver brings us the true cost of diet culture. It's an infographic. Money spent on ever-changing wardrobe sizes. Wait a second. Diet culture would have you either maintain your weight or slowly decrease. I believe it's when you're not doing diet culture and you keep expanding that you have to keep buying clothes constantly, forever. Time and energy spent planning and stressing. What are they referring to? The maybe 5 minutes a day of tracking your calories or making a salad? But think of all the time you save with your homemade food because you don't have to work as much because it's cheaper not to go out to eat. Money spent on diet programs. $100,000 for some. Look, if you spent $100,000 on a diet program, you either really seriously needed help, or you've made a mistake and you've paid somebody way too much money for something that you could have gotten for free on the internet. Relationships and quality of life. Wait, diet culture, when done properly, should improve your quality of life and in no way should affect your relationships. Unless part of it is getting rid of toxic people or something? Long-term physical and mental health problems. I think they're referring to getting extremely obese here, not diet culture. Self-esteem and self-trust. Yes, you'll have a higher self-esteem if you successfully diet, it's true. How exactly is that a cost? From Kipley. Point of view, you really want a walking pad for under your desk, but you're plus size and your parents are fat phobic, so they automatically assume it will be used for weight loss, and they get you the nicest one. So, just to be clear, this person's complaining because their parents bought them the nice version of something. That's a whole different level of whining. Shadow brings us. Someone writes in a reply to what looks like a YouTube video, there is everything wrong with being fat. Obesity leads to diabetes, joint pain, heart disease, cancers, depression, etc. It's not about being thin, it's about being healthy, and health will never equal obesity, and vice versa. Y'all need to stop lying to people. I was obese and 300 pounds. I was always in pain. I was slowly killing myself with food and not moving enough. This is disgusting. I understand you have an opinion on this, but I do too. This whole beauty movement has gotten to a point where it's no longer about people who actually can't change their looks, burn victims, actual disabled people, people with skin conditions. Y'all are playing with your lives, and you owe your self-respect by taking care of yourself. F everyone else. You should want to take care of yourself. God, I hate this so much. This is not okay. The creator of the video replies, this episode is meant to bring to light the realities of weight-based discrimination. Comments such as yours perpetuate the discrimination we're trying to combat. So the discrimination is saying that it's unhealthy? It's a weird kind of discrimination. Do smokers also feel the same way when people tell them smoking is unhealthy? You know what? They probably do. They continue. The intersectionality of health and fatness is nuanced, often personal, and needs to consider more than just one's relationship with food. Poignet replies, notice how the first response is not to call the commenter's statement untrue, but to claim that such thinking perpetuates fatphobic discrimination. It's a short hop from that statement hurts people to that statement must be false, or worse, to the conviction that truth is irrelevant. What is truth, said jesting Pilate, and would not stay for an answer. A taste of blueberries brings us. A calorie deficit is eating fewer calories than you need. To maintain your weight is the missing words there. If you eat fewer calories than you need, you will eventually starve. That is technically true. Not a serious issue for most people. If you need 2,000 calories a day and start eating only 1,800, to use broken but commonly expected numbers, putting aside the fact that measuring how many calories in food actually make it into our body is very difficult, and absorption and metabolic rates are different, so a 500-calorie meal could be 450 meaningful calories for one person and 250 for someone else, or to put it another way, calories are a very inaccurate measure of what energy we actually get from food. That's mostly not true unless you have a serious digestion issue. And if you do, you should be talking to your doctor. Your body will very quickly go, hold up, I'm getting less than I need. Something is wrong, and it will react accordingly every time. That, up to this point, is completely true. What will happen is your body will slowly start burning the fat it has stored up. Oh no! They continue. There's not a magic, small enough deficit that your body doesn't mind. Your body knows when it's not getting enough. It doesn't know why it's not getting enough. It's evolved under conditions where the assumption will be that there isn't enough, and it will adjust its growth, cravings, metabolism, and energy outputs to try to survive what it perceives as starvation. Yeah, this is something people are really concerned about. But in fact, I just looked at a systematic review, which looked at all the studies on this, and found that this is a very small issue, if it's an issue at all, and that in high-quality studies, there's very little reduction in the amount of energy your body burns, at least in a normal diet. Obviously, this doesn't apply to people who are literally starving, where their body actually is shutting down, but that's not something you get by reducing your calories by 200 a day. They continue, you might not think your body's starving, but it is, and it's acting like it. and that's very bad for you. And it also won't produce meaningful long-term weight loss. Ishimura Huntress brings us. Just saw a fudging weight loss commercial that fudging pissed me the fudge off. Oh my god. You may have seen this ad before, but it's an ad for Noom, which many people say is just based around giving people eating disorders. Is this a lesson on how to slander things without people being able to sue you? Where a grandma keeps putting food on this girl's plate and saying, made with love, and like, okay, the foods look like they're typical Mexican foods as well. Like tamales was one of the ones I can name immediately for sure. So you're slandering an entire culture and their diets and their food habits and how food is important to them. It's funny that they should bring up slander only seconds after slandering Noom. And then the girl looks at Noom on her phone and is like, I've been subjected to food pushing? Like, shut up, shut the fudge up. Not only that, but the fat girl in the commercial is probably no bigger than a size 16. Like, she's thick, but she's nowhere near, I have major medical problems when my doctor told me to lose weight or I will die fat. And like, Sometimes food is love. I've written about it in my fix. Sometimes when your love language is feeding people, they get fat because of it, and they deserve to enjoy that food and feel good because of it. I know my mom is one of those made with love type chefs, and if I said, you're food pushing onto me, that's bad psychology, she would be so fudging upset. Watching me lose weight because of my illness breaks her heart. Whenever I eat one of her meals and clean my plate, it makes her happy. Whenever I gain back weight from eating her food and fill up my clothes again, it makes her happy to know that she's taking care of me and fighting an illness that wants to carve my body to bones. Sometimes being fat means being loved. Fudge you. All right, that was all pretty stupid. I don't really want to talk about it. But I do want to talk about Noom for a second. I was looking at Noom a couple months ago. I typed in my email and everything, and I didn't join. And ever since then, Noom has been harassing me. They send me somewhere between 1 to 3 emails a day, constantly trying to make the deal seem better and better. And I think sometimes the deal is better. So if you're really considering Noom, my advice is to go to the website, start filling it out, and then at the end, don't buy it. Wait for a couple weeks or a month until the deal gets much better than the one they originally offered you, and then maybe sign up then. But I worry that if you sign up, they'll harass you even more. If you really want to do something like Noom, consider joining an online group, probably for free, and getting a calorie tracker. Noom doesn't seem to offer anything much more than that. Hitter Blowfish brings us, fat phobia is rooted in anti-blackness. The people who suffer the most for weight stigma are black women. Fat phobia is oppressive. People die from it. Fat people literally get hired less and paid less. Like, I get what you're trying to say, but you used the wrong example. I'm fat and gay, and I definitely face more oppression as a fat person than as a lesbian, 100%. Yes, I remember when fat people weren't allowed to marry. I do remember that. It was only like 15 years ago, right? Yeah. Tough times for fat people. Naked Lobster brings us, leftists owe fat people solidarity. Big Primrose replies, I demand that you support my insatiable capitalist-driven gluttony. All right, Naked Lobster brings us this one. Fat people dying younger than thin people is a myth. On average, people described as overweight and obese on BMI live just as long or longer than their normal counterparts. Someone replies, please add resources so we can convince people. Someone else, yo, you can't post stuff like this and not post an actual source. I think the author replies, it takes a simple Google search. Okay, look, I did it, someone writes, and they cite an article. That's what I found when I Googled obesity and mortality rates. Kinda contradictory to your statement, right? Also, to inform public about health topics without sources is ethically questionable. Here's the article I found. Morbidity and mortality associated with obesity by Muhammad Abdullah and others. Abstract. Obesity and its repercussions constitute an important source of morbidity, impaired quality of life, and its complications can have a major bearing on life expectancy. And it continues on from there, and it doesn't get much better in terms of how it talks about the effects of obesity. Spirited Split brings us content warning, fat phobia, diet culture, resolutions. As we get closer to New Year's resolutions time, I would like to remind everyone that you can in fact set body-centered resolutions without dieting, weight loss being the goal. As a fat person, it gets exhausting and feels very diminishing to see people enter into the new year making promises to themselves to not look like me, or vow to work as hard as they can to prevent their fear of fatness come true. I promise you, fat isn't bad. Fat phobia teaches us that we can't possibly be treating our bodies with dignity, grace, or love if we're fat. This leads to people glorifying thinness, diet culture, and the dehumanizing of fat folks. Fat phobia kills, so why strive to start a new year personifying the rhetoric? It's so important to realize the impact these resolutions have on people who you so desperately don't want to look like. It's also important to realize all the ways you can set body goals without falling into fat phobia. Consider these resolutions instead: gaining strength, body affirmations, more movement in a way that you love, new daily skin, hair, body routine, promising to give your body grace, dismantling fat phobia in your life, learning to listen to your body's needs intuitively. I both disagree and agree with this person. The result you want might be to lose weight, and the result you want might be to improve your blood pressure or something like this. But your goals should be things that you can personally control, like the number of calories you eat, or the amount of vegetables you eat, or something like this. And you're just hoping to get the results. And if you don't get the results, you can always reanalyze your goals and see if they're maybe too strict or not strict enough, or what you can do to improve things. Chevy Bowtie brings us. It's a book from Amazon, Intuitive Eating to Lose Weight. I might do a review of this book in a week or two. It looks kind of interesting. Someone comments on this book, "You have got to be kidding me. I'm fudging appalled and disgusted by this mockery. This absolute oxymoron of using intuitive eating for the purpose of weight loss. Fudge the author who wrote this piece of trash. This is a kick in the face to every single person who's ever fought for fat liberation and eating disorder recovery. I'm furious that this book is being sold. We couldn't stop at thin people appropriating euphemisms for fatness or taking over and watering down body positivity. Diet culture had to take over intuitive eating too, despite intuitive eating being the antithesis to diet culture and weight loss. I hope this author doesn't make a single dime on this harmful, poopy book." Well, bad news for them. They already made about $4 or whatever percentage they get from me buying a copy. If you can lose weight through intuitive eating, and I've heard some people have, I don't see why that's a big deal and would offend people so much. Intuitive eating, as far as I understand it when done correctly, just means figuring out how to not eat poop and eating less sugar and eating foods that are more satisfying to you. Not just eating in the hopes of getting a dopamine hit. Naked Lobster brings us something from a medical student. BMI is such BS because how are you going to tell me that there's any kind of fair comparison between men's and women's bodies when they're fundamentally built different? Like, we have boobs, lol, specifically designed fat blobs to feed kids. Why the heck do we still entertain this metric? I'm going to answer their question honestly. Why do we entertain this metric? Because we find that regardless of sex and almost regardless of race, that people in a healthy BMI are less likely to get high cholesterol or high blood pressure, and people at higher BMIs are more likely to get high cholesterol and high blood pressure. And we also know that if people in general get too low a BMI, they start to have other issues. The fact that men and women line up is almost an accident, like the way the moon appears almost exactly the same size as the sun, and the moon can almost precisely eclipse the sun. Cracked rib cages brings us. I had a surgeon, who I knew was a doctor, refuse to operate on me without mentioning that as little as a 7% reduction in weight could have made it safe to proceed. I have also been told that I was too fat to have anesthesia as I lay on a gurney waiting to have a screening colonoscopy that terrified me, even though I had made sure to have the sedation medically pre-authorized. After I begged and pleaded, the anesthesiologist reluctantly relented. But when I woke up, I could feel the bruises on my face. I realized the anesthesiologist had grabbed my cheeks and pushed my jaw forward to keep my airway open in a needed jaw thrust maneuver. I told myself that because fat people have fat necks, he probably had to use more pressure than he might have otherwise, the kind of pressure that leaves marks. But having been shamed so many times before, I couldn't help but wonder if a bit of extra force was also my justified punishment for wanting anesthesia. So let me get your story straight. You begged somebody to do a procedure they weren't comfortable with doing, and now you feel offended that they perhaps used a lot of force in doing this procedure that they, in the first place, didn't want to do because they knew it was a difficult procedure to do. So, in answer to your original question, yes, you're the jerk. This one I found very strange. It was brought to us by Drunk. Airline forced to pay for psychotherapy for a plus-sized model. A court in Brazil has ordered Qatar Airways to pay for psychotherapy for a plus-sized model they reportedly refused to board because she was too fat. This is such a strange story. What exactly did Qatar Airways do? I read the article as such as it was and couldn't find any clear indication of what they did that was quite so awful. Does Brazil just have some very strange laws? I almost wish I was on the jury of that trial to find out what the awful thing the airline did was. Was it really because they refused to board her, or was it something else? This is from Am I the Jerk? It was posted by Sally's Salon. Am I the jerk for getting up from my chair in the middle of Christmas dinner and shouting, "Shut the fudge up about my body," in response to my husband's observation? So, ever since I had my son months ago, my husband has started making indirect comments about my body. He never says any hurtful words, but I find his observations, as he calls it, hurtful. For example, he'd see me wearing an old top and say, "Oh, that top used to look good on you, but not anymore, though." Or when he looks at my waist and says, "Wow, didn't know your waist could get this wide." Basically, passive stuff that I tried to ignore, till it extended to friends and family. For your information, this went on for months and months and months. We went to Christmas celebration at this family's home. My sister-in-law complimented my floral maxi dress, and my husband said, "I agree it looks nice on you, though I have to admit that your waist could get smaller than this." Awkward silence took over. I was absolutely fuming, and this was my last straw. So I got up from my chair in the middle of dinner and shouted at the top of my lungs, "Shut the fudge up about my body." He was absolutely speechless as his family stared, while some others tried to get me to calm down, but the situation got more tense and dinner ended up being cut short, and my husband storming off to his friend's place to spend the night, upon leaving a very nasty text saying I embarrassed him and made a scene over an observation he made. He called me childish and told me to get therapy for my insecurities instead of verbally abusing him and scaring his family. Now I feel like an absolute idiot jerk, and like I ruined Christmas for him and everybody with my oversensitivity. Am I the jerk? No, obviously your husband shouldn't be making comments like that, especially just in a mean way. I could see him possibly criticizing in a kind way, if that makes sense, but not the way it sounds like he was doing. And to be fair, Thanksgiving and Christmas, there's always going to be some drama there between the various relatives. Usually it's not between a husband and their wife, though. Oh well. This is in Best of Redditor Updates. It was originally posted by Noms for All. Would I be the jerk if I took actions against my husband's snoring? I am getting concerned and fed up with my husband's snoring. We've been married for a few years, but the consistent snoring has only started over the past 6 months or so. Before then, usually he would only snore if he was out drinking with his buddies all night. Fast forward to now, and I'm waking up about 10 times a night. I've mentioned the more frequent snoring to him a few times. But of course, since he's not experiencing it while he's awake, he just shrugs it off. He's gained a bit of weight over the past 3 years, maybe 30 to 40 pounds, and I'm wondering if that's what's triggering the snoring. Of course, there's not really a good way for me to bring that up as a potential cause without seeming like a little bit of a jerk, and I know there might be other causes. I absolutely love my husband to bits, but I am a very grumpy person when I don't get sleep. Would I be the jerk if I insisted that he visit a doctor about his snoring, or say that we will have separate sleeping arrangements until he does? Verdict, not the jerk. They add, "Thank you for all the kind responses and suggestions. I see I'm not the only one literally and metaphorically losing sleep over snoring. I hadn't really thought about sleep apnea being a possibility for him, but I've been concerned there's an underlying medical issue. I'll be looking into more substantial pillows and making sure there's not some allergen that could be irritating his system in a room. I'm also going to have a discussion with him and be clear that I'm coming from a place of love and concern. Since I know he doesn't love going to the clinic, I'll offer to go to the doctor with him so we can see if he needs a sleep study. We do have a spare bedroom, so if I need to escape in there periodically, I will." Update. Based on feedback, I sat down with my husband to share my concerns about the sudden onset of his excessive snoring. I said I thought he may have developed sleep apnea, which could be serious. I encouraged him to go see a doctor, stating that I would be willing to go with him. I also said that I would go to the guest room if I was unable to sleep due to snoring. After this conversation, nothing really changed and it made me very frustrated. There were a few times when I retreated to the guest room to try to sleep. The first time I didn't lock the door. He came in the room, immediately fell back asleep, and snored right in my face. I was mad and made it clear that if I was in the guest room sleeping, it was because he was snoring and he was not to come in. This pattern went on for a bit before everything blew up mid-April. I asked if he wanted to come for a walk with me, and he said he would. Just a few minutes into the walk, he said I was walking too fast and taking it too seriously. I told him if he didn't want to walk, he should just go home. He did, and I finished my walk, fuming. When I got home, I said we needed to talk. I told him first and foremost that I love him to bits, but I was not going to sugarcoat what I needed to say. I reminded him that he used to be so active, as we used to hike and run together. Now he has gone from being a healthy weight to overweight to obese. I reminded him of the earlier conversation about sleep apnea and asked if he had looked into the causes of the condition. He admitted that he hadn't. I said that while not all cases have the same cause, many times sudden snoring can be the result of weight gain or serious problems. I almost cried at this point, saying I was really worried about the long-term impact on his health if things didn't change. I ended the conversation by saying that I realized that the beginning of a pandemic is a bad time to try to get healthy. He had listened quietly the whole time before responding, or is it? He thanked me for my honesty and acknowledged that he had not taken any of this seriously, but that he wanted to. Although he didn't go to see a doctor. He has been working out and eating well since that conversation. Yesterday, he shared that he was down 15 pounds and his goal is to lose 20 more by the end of summer. His snoring has pretty much stopped and we are both sleeping better. It wasn't easy to have those talks, but I'm thrilled that he took the initiative to take care of himself, and I no longer have to worry about sleeping in the spare room. They add in a comment, my husband is currently downstairs snoring away, but it's because he currently has the dreaded RSV and is all stuffed up. After the original post, he did end up getting a sleep study, but it was inconclusive. I chalked this up to him not reading the at-home testing instructions carefully. We constantly joke around about him never reading the directions to anything, but I wish he would for stuff like this. He's planning to get a sleep study done at a medical facility in a few months now that restrictions are lifting. Although I'm still convinced that he probably has sleep apnea, a doctor recommended a wedge pillow specifically designed for patients with acid reflux and a couple of medications. They have helped tremendously with his overall health and the snoring. There were some ups and downs with his weight, but in general he is healthier than he was when I wrote the last 2 posts. He even recently bought a workout bench and was lifting again before he got sick. His job schedule also changed significantly, so we have adjusted to often sleeping in different spaces. That way, we aren't waking each other up in general. We also set up do not disturb times, where neither of us will go into the other space after a certain time. Thankfully, no more snoring in my face. We are still happily married, even if we can both be stubborn at times. He's a really good partner in general, and hopefully he will continue to make his health a priority. Am I the jerk? Warning, this one involves a very sensitive mother. Am I the jerk for banishing my teenage daughter's friend from our house because she made fun of my weight? I have 2 kids with my husband, a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. Our daughter has always been a little socially awkward to the point where we've had her tested since we suspected her of being on the spectrum. Turns out she isn't on the spectrum, she's just a natural introvert. However, this year in school, we were thrilled when our daughter made a new friend her age, since that is an area in which she struggles. Long story short, she recently invited her new friend over, with our approval, to have dinner at our house and then spend the night. So my daughter's friend came over. My husband is usually the cook in the family, and this night was no exception. He made us all a really nice meal. During the course of said meal, I asked my daughter's friend, "Are you enjoying the food?" She responded, "Yes, your husband is a great cook. No wonder you've ended up a bigger woman." The room got quiet for several moments. My husband tried to laugh it off and change the subject, but I wasn't having it. The girl had just leveled a completely uncalled-for insult at me. My daughter's friend seemed to realize that she'd messed up, but she didn't say anything else. We finished an awkward dinner in mostly silence, and my daughter's friend did stay the night. This was a couple months ago. Recently, my daughter asked if she could have her friend back over, and I told her sure, if she's going to apologize to me. When our daughter asked what I meant, I reminded her of what she said. My daughter responded that it was over and she didn't want to bring it up again. She then went to her father and asked. He said sure, but she then told him what I'd said. He came to me and said, "Daughter's friend just felt awkward and tried to make a joke. It didn't land. For the sake of her daughter, can't you just let it go?" Yes, I could, but the thing is that I just want an apology from the girl. I need to see that she understands how rude she was before I can get on board with her and my daughter hanging out. My husband says that I'm being weird for insisting on an apology from a 14-year-old, especially since that girl is such a good friend of our daughter. I think it's weird that I'm still waiting for an apology from that same girl. Seriously, that's all I need. I just need to know that any friend of my daughter's willing to own up to her own screw-ups. Purple Fox responds and says it much better than I ever could. Of course you're the jerk. She didn't even call you fat, she called you a larger woman. You feel fat, that's why you felt offended. You seem to be very insecure about your weight, but clearly not enough to do something about it. She's 14. Kids at that age are not always politically correct and say things as they see them. This was originally in terrible Facebook memes, but I actually thought it was pretty good. It was posted by Go Fast, Don't Die. A Big Mac doesn't cost you $3.99, it costs your health. Netflix doesn't cost you $17.99, it costs your time. Social media isn't free, it costs your focus. Lesson, there's always a hidden cost. To me, that all seems exactly true. Although I'm not sure what I'd do with all my time if I stopped watching TV. This one was written for Harvard Health Publishing. Impossible and Beyond. How healthy are these meatless burgers? Eventually, the article starts making statements like, the bad news, meatless burgers are heavily processed and high in saturated fat. There's an old saying which works incredibly well here. Perfection is the enemy of good. This person's not happy enough with people eating food that contains no cholesterol. They're not happy enough with people switching away from eating meat because it's bad for the environment or because it's morally, because they think it's unethical. No, they need them to switch to eating only vegetables, nothing else, just vegetables. I imagine they'd also be unhappy if people enjoyed the food that they ate. I found this one originally in CNBC. Growing obesity crisis in U.S. prompts CDC to expand body mass index charts for severely overweight kids. Previously, the charts only went to a BMI of 37. They have now been expanded to go up to a BMI of 60, because our kids have gotten so incredibly fat. I don't know why they needed the BMI to go up that high, because once you're past 37, isn't the advice always, you're too fat? I'm not exactly sure how a chart helps at all. Thanks for listening to that episode. Extra special thanks go to Emmett McNally, Rig, Cupcake or Death, MMC, Story, Megtran 2000, Cly, That One Guy, Maria P, Average Loser, Wolf Child Rusk, Just a Girl, and S. West. If you enjoyed this episode, consider clicking like and maybe subscribe. If you really liked it and have the money to spare, consider becoming a member. I wish all of you wonderful people a wonderful day.